pen is mightier than the sword. If there's any place where that is the most relevant, it is in a game of chess. In today's video, I'm going to tell you what a pen is, the different types of pen, and ultimately how this chess tactic can help you improve your game for the better. Let's begin. Let's talk about what a pen is exactly. A pen is a piece under attack but can't or shouldn't move because it would expose the piece behind it. Note, you can only pin with a long-range attacking piece, such as a bishop, a rook, or a queen. Now, let's break this down a little further. A piece that is pinned to the king is known as an absolute pin. Remember, you can't expose your king to attacks because you are putting yourself in check. Putting yourself in check is very illegal. If you see right here, the bishop moved from f1 to b5 and is pinning the knight to this king once this pawn moved up to d6. So now this knight right here can't move anywhere because it would be exposing the king to attack. Now let's take a look at what a relative pin looks like. A piece that is pinned to any other piece, not the king, is known as a relative pin. These pins are dangerous because you expose the piece behind you to attack. You shouldn't move from these pins unless it makes sense to do so, like with double attacks, which I will definitely cover later in this series. Right here, the bishop came from c8 all the way to g4 and is now pinning this knight to the queen. The queen, of course, is more valuable than a knight. So, again, unless it makes sense to move this knight, you would be advised not to because you don't want to expose your queen to attack. So, how exactly do you spot a pin? Well, let's take a look. For an absolute pin, watch for when your opponent places a piece in front of or on the side of the king. In this example, the bishop that was in front of this knight decided to move here to c7. Now this knight is pinned to the king, so this knight can't move from a potential attack from the queen. And as you can see here, the queen and the rook are lined up, which means they can attack this knight against this king and have a very nice checkmate. Also, it is important to look out for pawns that haven't moved in front of or on the side of the king. Those are usually vulnerable to some type of attack. Relative pins look different but operate the same way. Any piece behind a pawn that is not a pawn or king is always more valuable and should be right for a pin. Note here, valuable is subjective and objective. A piece may be valuable because it is worth more points than a piece pinned in front of it. That's objective value. Subjective value is taking a piece behind a more valuable piece. If you look at this example right here, we see that a queen, the more valuable piece, is in front of this rook, which is less valuable. But the piece behind might be adding more value to the board than the piece in front. Looking further at this example, we see that this rook is attacking this queen, and this rook is also backed up by the queen. However, black is in a bad situation here. Black is unmistakenly trapped in a back rank checkmate. The queen's just going to take, the queen is going to take your queen, and this rook is going to take your queen back. So while black moved its rook in front of the queen to pin the queen in front of the rook, it actually put itself in a serious checkmate. Note here, while you can't always avoid pins, look for ways to do so. As you can see here, the rook came over and took the pawn that was in front of the queen, and now this queen is under attack. Now, it works out for white that white can actually take the rook, the queen will take back, and the rook will simply take the queen. And now white is ahead by... Or, actually, I don't think white is ahead, But what white did do is they evened the playing field. Again, for a pin, if you need to put a piece in front of a king. Like as you can see right here, this knight is pinned to the king because his queen is here. So this knight can't move. That was probably in the knight's plan originally to land on a square, and that's why it's here. And though it has protection from the rook here, the knight itself can be of better use because it is pinned to the king. So that's something to watch out for. The main thing here with pins is that, again, if you come up with a plan, follow the plan, but do so with proper calculation. Examine the whole board and watch out for any traps. Now, let's look at a few puzzles that give better context of what pins look like and how they are truly mightier than the sword. Example 1. As we can see right here is the pin for white. White's bishop is attacking this pawn, which happens to be in front of the queen. The queen is the more valuable piece. So if black could move this pawn, it would not be advisable to do so because there's a more valuable piece behind it. This is an example of a relative pin. So as it was white's turn to play, they decided to bring the knight out and further advancing their plan, whatever the plan is. But black has a plan of its own. See, this queen and this bishop are both lined up at this square, and this square is directly next to the king. So what that means is that black could either check or checkmate white right now. So as we see, black is going to put the king in check. The king is going to have to get out of that check as best way as can, and black will deliver a checkmate by simply taking the bishop. Okay, so now let's take a look at another pin. So as you can see right here, let's look at all the pins. Okay, so currently we have this pawn, our pawn, in front of the king, and this rook would of course like to get that pawn out of there. However, that pawn is being backed up by our rook. If the rook were to take that pawn, the rook will be exposing itself to what will be known as a absolute pin, because that would be a piece in front of the king that's being attacked by another piece. So I think the best idea is to move the queen here. And now look what we have. The queen is now stuck in an absolute pin with white's queen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that queen. Black has to jump out of the way out of this square to take back the queen, because now the white is being attacked, or black is being attacked by a king or a queen, and can't go to these squares because these pawns are attacking the square. So black jumps up, and now white moves down to promote to a queen, putting black's king in checkmate. Okay, what do we have here? All right, so black's rook is attacking this bishop, which has the king behind it. So this right here is known as a absolute pin. So this bishop right here cannot move whatsoever because it would expose the king to check. And you can never expose your king to any attack. So next the rook at the corner will move to attack our knight. Our knight will simply move to put the king in check. And now the king has some decisions to make. The king goes here. This knight will simply jump here. If the king decides to go here, the knight will simply jump there, and this bishop will expose the king. All right, let's do one more here. First, let's spot any pins or attacks. So the first pin I see right here is black has this rook right here. This rook is attacking this knight, but if the knight were to ever move, this other rook is there for the taking. So we have a relative pin right here. So as playing as white, we have to take notice and say, okay, what can we do there? Can we do anything? Is that something we really need to be worried about? Now, it's important for white to pay attention to where black's king is. Black's king is in this back row. Okay. Black's king, these are black's king's only squares to escape to. What we do know is we have a pawn on this nice little outpost right here. This pawn is protecting or controlling these 2 squares right here. So that's 2 out of the potential 5 squares the king could escape to. Now, the king's own pawn is there, so obviously that's a square the king can't escape to. So the king has 2 squares, these squares right here. If we were to move our rook right there, where could the king escape to? Can't escape to there, can't escape to here or here, and obviously the rook is taking away these 2 squares. So even though there's this relative pin right here that may be a cause of concern, it's always important to look at the board and examine where your pieces are. And we have a checkmate here. Let's do one more. So we have an absolute pin right here. Our queen is attacking this knight, but more importantly, our queen is really threatening this king behind this knight. So this knight, while it would want to move, it cannot move because of that relative pin. So our job now is to figure out, okay, how can we take advantage of that? Well, here's what I see. I see this knight right here. This knight right here would love to jump to this square because, one, this will be attacking the king and attacking the queen at the same time. That is known as a fork, specifically a knight fork, which we will talk about 2 videos from now. So we're just going to jump there. The king is going to move up, and we're going to take this queen. I hope these puzzles gave you more context as what an absolute and relative pin look like. I hope you've seen how to potentially use a pin to your advantage. And if not, hopefully in the future you will, with a little bit more experience, you will see how pins can be useful and dangerous if you don't look out for them. The pin is just one tactic in your toolbox to use to not only expose the king, but to win more chess games. But there's more tactics where that came from. In the next video, I'm going to show you a technique that is similar to the pin, except it works in reverse. Instead of the piece in front being more valuable than a king, the piece behind the king is pretty valuable. Tune in next video to see what technique I'm referring to.